The effects of trauma before adolescence. Studies have provided consistent findings that more than one-half of children in the United States experience multiple traumatic events before adolescence. A traumatic event can refer to excessive corporal punishment, childhood sexual abuse, traumatic bereavement, and witnessing domestic violence. Experiencing trauma in early childhood can have psychological, social, neurological, physical, and spiritual effects and could impact one's success in finding a career. Fortunately, there has been successful treatment therapy for those suffering from traumatic events. Childhood sexual abuse, or CSA, is a powerful traumatic event that will be explored further as a representation of trauma. Although trauma victims can have multiple lifelong effects, there is hope. Childhood sexual abuse can be referred to as inappropriate touching, oral sex, exposure to pornography, or sexual intercourse. Statistics reveal that 1 out of every 3 girls are sexually abused before the age of 18. One answer to the astonishing number is the heightened use of pornography. Arthur reveals that 86% of convicted rapists were regular pornography users. Wood's statement is explanatory. The internet has created new categories of sexual offending and has forced us to rethink our definitions of sexual behavior and sexuality. Perry argues that early CSA can alter the brain systems and has the potential to affect all future functional capabilities of the child. Trauma sufferers can suffer from lifelong psychological, social, neurological, physical, and spiritual effects. Some psychological sufferings may be eating disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorder, major depression, borderline personality disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, problems sleeping, nightmares, problems in memory storage and retrieval, and flashbacks. Survivors can also suffer from social effects, such as unwanted pregnancies, abortions, multiple partnerships, brief sexual relationships, engaging in self-harm, and even suicide. Neurologically, traumatic experiences impact the development and function of the brain. Teacher argues that trauma in early life can trigger a range of effects, including changes in hormones and neurotransmitters that mediate development of vulnerable brain regions. These effects can be seen as brain abnormalities, such as limbic irritability, deficient development of the left hemisphere, and deficient left-right hemisphere integration. Victims also suffer physical impacts. One meta-analysis review on sexual abuse found an association with a lifetime of somatic disorders such as gastrointestinal disorders, nonspecific chronic pain, psychogenic seizures, and chronic pelvic pain. Regarding spiritual effects, trauma victims struggle to feel loved and accepted by God, trust in God's providential care for the future, and tend to have decreased involvement in church later in life. Furthermore, they are less likely to experience a sense of community with others and struggle to act ethically. According to Landrum and Davis, people are happier and more successful in a job that matches their interests, values, and skills. People search for environments to exercise their skills, express their values, and tackle agreeable problems. In theory, trauma sufferers could have difficulty being successful in a career due to their loss of sense of self. Mullen explains how trauma victims can experience disintegration anxiety. This sense of disintegration anxiety is related to the idea that the child's sense of self is annihilated. This can lead to profound feelings of loss pertaining to their sense of self, self-efficacy, self-belief, self-worth, and identity. Thus, one can argue it would be hard for trauma victims to learn effective skills, attitudes, and values and execute them in their environment, and therefore may not be successful in finding a job that makes them happy. However, more research would need to be completed to validate this theory. Fortunately, there is one powerful therapy approach for trauma victims: cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. CBT endorses the belief that how people feel and behave depends on their meanings of interpretations associated with their thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about themselves and circumstances. Clinical trials have found CBT to be the most effective therapy for abuse-related psychopathology. One model used for treatment is TF-CBT, trauma-focused CBT. TF-CBT is structured for child/caregiver therapy and consists of weekly 90-minute sessions during which multiple components are covered, such as relaxation, affective expression and regulation, and cognitive coping. TF-CBT was originally developed to treat CSA, but empirical evidence reveals that TF-CBT is effective for children exposed to abuse, domestic violence, bereavement due to traumatic circumstances, PTSD, and may also help with youth depression and problem behaviors. Aside from CBT, there is a greater hope for trauma sufferers. In one study, Gall reported that a proportion of young adult survivors indicated that their spiritual beliefs is what helped them heal. Another study revealed themes of resiliency, having a positive sense of self-regard, perceived internal control, and spirituality. Spirituality was identified as a protective factor against the development of depression, shame, and interpersonal difficulties. Having a sense of life purpose appeared key to overcoming the abuse and maintaining a sense of well-being in adulthood. Philippians 4:13 explains how one can cope with traumatic events. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Therefore, one may assume that those with a biblical worldview may suffer fewer and/or shorter effects. Romans 8:28 assures the believer, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. It is learned that experiencing trauma in early childhood can have psychological, social, neurological, physical, and spiritual effects and could impact one's success in a career. Some psychological sufferings may be eating disorders, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and major depression. Socially, trauma victims may have more unwanted pregnancies, abortions, and multiple partnerships. Neurologically, the development and function of the brain may be affected, and physical effects may be gastrointestinal disorders, nonspecific chronic pain, and psychogenic seizures. Spiritually, trauma victims tend to feel unloved and unaccepted by God, and experience greater difficulty in trusting God's plan and provision for them. Trauma sufferers may also have difficulty in finding a career they feel happy in due to their loss of sense of self. Fortunately, cognitive behavioral therapy has proven to be an effective treatment for abuse-related psychopathology. However, there is an even greater hope. Those who clung to God as their refuge reported themes of resiliency and had fewer negative effects. Suffering traumatic events does not have to be the end. Psalm 118:5 victoriously declares, "Out of my distress I called on the Lord. The Lord answered me and set me free." And here are my references.